my
an athletic leading master's program at the University of Missouri. And we are starting this series of brief interviews with leaders in the athletic world that we believe have shared values with our program, and to be able to highlight their work and their ideas. Why 6 questions? Well, we call it 6 questions because the number of questions were chosen as it represents the number of iconic columns that you see right behind me, which our guest is very familiar with, on Francis Quadrangle. And so for the university, these columns represent resilience, grit, and other positive values, not only of the university, but of our particular program. So today I'm very pleased to be able to speak with Colgate University Director of Athletics and triple alum of University of Missouri, Dr. Nicki Moore. Dr. Moore was named a Colgate Vice President and Director of Athletics in 2018 and has been involved in Division I athletics, by my count, for about 16 years.
Sounds about right.
Prior to her current appointment at Colgate, Dr. Moore held senior positions at UNC in Chapel Hill and at the University of Oklahoma. And as an administrator, it seems, Dr. Moore, you've been very focused on athlete equity and well-being. So good for you. Dr. Moore was also had quite an esteemed athletic career. She was an All-American runner at University of Missouri. So Dr. Moore, thanks for being here. And if it's okay, I'd like to start with a question that is not one of our 6 questions. And as an administrator and a former athlete, what's the best thing we can be doing for our athletes right now?
In this particular time?
Yes.
COVID, or in COVID and in amidst what I hope in some ways might be a revolution. I think the best thing is to be reaching out to them and checking in on them. Not simply, asking, how are you doing? But empathizing, with what they might be experiencing, and then really listening. I think, just asking them to share how they're feeling and how they're reacting to this, and if there is any, specific way to be helpful or supportive of them. I think that's probably the best thing we can do right now.
Yeah, I think that's sage advice, that just the presence and just being able to listen. I think it's really important right now.
Yeah, and of course, the other thing I might say is, this makes it at least 2 things, but finding ways to really look hard at what we're doing on a day-to-day basis in our programs, and planning for something that is change. Really thinking about how our student athletes of color experience not only our teams and our athletics departments, but the university at large, and getting really concrete about making some changes there, so that there are either, when they come back, that there are additional support systems in place, or as we can start to recognize where there might be policies or other barriers to our students of color, being able to feel safe and really pursue full actualization on our campuses, getting a whole lot more aggressive about addressing those with our colleagues and with our colleagues in the athletics, and then also on campus.
And also, we talked a little bit earlier about the opportunity to be introspective and to really think about what empathy really is, and to think about what we can do to impact change and raise our level of emotional intelligence right now.
Yeah, no, that's true. There's so much out there right now that is encouraging, because it's almost like you can't help but to find some pretty good resources that can help, in particular, those of us who are white, to do even deeper work about, so that we understand truly what our position is in knowingly or not, perpetuating systemic racism and being complicit in white supremacist systems. None of us want to imagine ourselves as doing that actively, but by our silence or by our passivity, we do. And so, it's hard work. It's uncomfortable work. But it's such a great opportunity right now to do some of that work and then be better prepared to actually be, really good resources and mentors and teachers of our student athletes when they come back.
Yeah, we've been provided a great opportunity. We need to take advantage of it.
Yes.
Well, thank you for that. So now to get to our 6 questions, our 6 official questions. First one, what does positive leading mean to you?
I think it really, is about having love and respect and science at the heart of everything that we do. It certainly is an absence of certain things, but I think even more so, it's really about having, a genuine care and concern for the learning, development, and success of our student athletes or our coaches or those whom we're supervising at the heart of what we do. I think if we prioritize that and become increasingly aware of when we might veer from that as being our priority, that we have a better chance of being consistently positive leaders. So, I think it's also, for me, it's about, being pretty relentless about encouraging others that we influence to behave in these ways that are positive, that do build up others, and holding those to account who do not. And sometimes that is almost more important that, when we allow, essentially when as leaders we allow behaviors that don't align with the values that we're trying to create in the cultures we're building, we're essentially promoting them. So those are some of the things that come to mind for me.
You mentioned science. How does science inform you in particular?
There's for me, a lot of it, certainly my background and experience as a psychologist is very informative to me. One of the theories or ways of being with clients that was so impactful to me as a psychologist was the transactional theory of change. Sorry, I don't know that I'm almost forgetting it. But it's Prochaska and DiClemente's, I think it's it's not. Trans-theoretical. Sorry, trans-theoretical model of change, and then motivational interviewing. And one of the key things that I think connects to positive coaching is that motivation and drive and desire is going to have the most chance for long-term sustaining long-term and success when that comes from within. And so in positive coaching sometimes can feel like more of a long-term kind of approach, because certainly there are times when a more negative coaching approach can achieve a short-term outcome, but so for me, I'm more interested in long-term success. I'm interested in the long-term development of the sport programs I lead and of the people that I lead. And I trust the science because sometimes you can't trust the immediate outcomes. It's sometimes it feels like it's too slow, or you're not getting the outcomes that you want right now. So being able to trust that science is really helpful to, I think, stay the course.
It's one of the most surprising things that they hear from is when we tell them stop trying to motivate people and help them motivate themselves. And it's for a lot of coaches and leaders, it's so liberating to hear that they don't have to stay up all night thinking, how am I going to motivate this person, rather than how can I help somebody motivate themselves? And it's a different lens.
Yeah, it totally is. And it's freeing,
Yes.
because it now puts you, instead of having to be the creator, you're simply the guide. You're simply
Yes.
guiding and unlocking the brilliance and creativity within those that you're leading. And it's there. And to get to be someone who is unlocking that, as opposed to imposing some kind of brilliance that you're trying to have for them, it's so much easier, really, when you think about
Yeah.
it.
That's wonderful. So when do you enjoy your role most?
You know, um, the first thing that comes to mind, I enjoy a whole lot about my role. I didn't necessarily expect to, honestly. But I love being able to see, it sounds super cheesy, but I love to see the growth and development. I'm sorry about that background noise. He'll chill here shortly. But I love to see growth and development, both in student athletes and in coaches and in staff. When I can be a little bit of a part of, maybe seeing a light bulb come on, that still is what, at the end of the day, I look back and, like, that's my favorite part of the day. Um, I will also admit, and I've told several people this since I took over, or since I became an athletics director, it turns out that I really do like being in charge. And and I didn't expect that, but I like being able to try to do this thing kind of my way. And that sounds bad, and I kind of hate to admit it, but there is some, I guess I share it in the case that there might be someone who hears this, that might be reluctant to pursue positions of leadership. Because it took me a long time to kind of finally convince myself that I wanted to try to do this. And it turns out that if you have, I think within your heart or your mind, a conviction about how things can be done really well, it's really fun to get to have a little more influence and try to create that.
So that's actually perhaps a great segue into our next question, which is what provided your most influential learning experience?
I've had so many. That's like daily. That's a really hard one. I feel like the times when I've learned the most, if I had to put it in one, would be the transitions, like transitional moments. It's sort of like when you look at learning curves and where you really are just like growing and learning and having your eyes open. It's been, when I maybe transitioned from being a student to being a professional, from when I transitioned from being, a psychologist to being an administrator. When I moved towns, I mean, that it seems kind of obvious, but at the same time, I think that occasionally I'll talk to professionals who maybe feel like they're a little bit stagnant, or they might be afraid to make a move, whether it be in position or in location or school. But just to be able to be, if nothing else, to be exposed to a whole different set of people, when you make those transitions and moves, you learn a whole lot. So I would say transitions generally. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about my time at Missouri, though. Talk about transitions. I mean, that was probably one of the biggest transitions of my life. I grew up in a small town in Northeast Missouri. It's a wonderful town, but also somewhat limited in exposure to different kinds of people, and people with different experiences. And so coming to Missouri, being on the track team, traveling with my teammates, being roommates with different people, and then my program, my counseling psych program at Mizzou, those experiences on that campus at Missouri really transformed me, and changed, like, I think who I am, and or at least how I think. So yeah, so that would be if I had to pick one experience.
Well, you said something really interesting, and I think it's important to kind of double back, and that is, there's a dearth of women athletic directors, particularly at the Division I level. So what happened, or maybe it's not just one thing, but what convinced you that you were, that you were capable and wanted to be a leader, and that this might help a lot of other women who are having similar self-doubt.
Yeah, yeah. Um, it really was a mixture of things. Some of the things that come to mind. One is I did have really good mentors. And I recall there being a time when when I worried that I didn't have like the single academic mentor or whatever. And the reality is we do have a fair bit of control over who is willing to mentor us if we approach those things well. If we try to provide, if we give life back into other people whom we might like to learn from. And I have so rarely encountered anyone in my career who has refused to be helpful or has refused to have a conversation. So I think about Coach McGuire. Frankly, I think he saw in me earlier than I certainly could. Joe Castiglione was a huge. I've had a lot of advocates in my life who have given me experiences, opened the doors, and then I've walked through them. In some cases, barged through them. I also do though recall, and so Joe used to, when I was at Oklahoma, he kept giving me new responsibilities, and with each new responsibility, you get a new perspective and start to develop confidence or a belief that you can do it. I also reached a point of frustration. I was at Oklahoma and I started thinking about maybe doing this, and then I had the opportunity to go to UNC and then learn from Bubba. And at some point along the lines, and it wasn't Joe's fault or Bubba's fault, but I was like, I think I can do this. Like, and I think I like I did. I wanted to. There were moments where it wasn't being done the way I thought it should be done, and so anyway. And then also my husband, I have to give him a little bit of a shout out. My husband told me, he was like, before you get out of this profession, you need to be an athletics director. He said, I think you'll find that it's the difference between being a babysitter and having a child, and or being a parent essentially. And that resonated for me because frankly, children have not liked me all that much throughout my life. Like, I was a babysitter, wasn't a very good one. My kid likes me a lot, and I love spending time with him. And it sounds crazy, but that was honestly a pretty influential kind of perspective for me. Like, okay, I'll give this a try.
That's really interesting. All right, so let's take a shift here. So, what a lot of our coaches, our leaders, are interested in learning more and reading. So, what are one or two books that you believe every aspiring leader should read?
This is also hard because I really think about like what has there been a handbook? Has there been a one book that I've come back to time and time again? One book that I've recommended time and time again, and that I think is really useful. It's actually only available in audiobook format, but it's Brene Brown's The Power of Vulnerability. And I think it's an important listen in to help people become more, myself at least, more aware of when I start to shield or guard myself, and when I start to shut down from a vulnerability standpoint. Because when we shut those things down, we put up those shields to vulnerability, we do become less able to learn, I think, and less willing to listen, and less open to other people. So that's a big one, I think.
And less opportunity for trust.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And without trust, there's not a whole lot. You lose influence when you don't have trust. You gain influence when you do. So that's been a big one for me. And she's really funny and smart. So it's a really super easy one to listen to. Another one that came to mind is Patrick Lencioni's The Advantage. It's kind of a compilation of all of his books, but as I thought about, if I were speaking to a young coach who maybe is seeking to be a head coach, or I think for me, as I became an athletics director, that book helped me to shape it helped me to think through how I wanted to create some structures within my organization, how I wanted to have my team operate, some of those sorts of things. So that was a really good one. It's not in his typical storytelling style, but it's got some really good information. The other one that comes to mind is a book called So You Want to Talk About Race. And it's kind of a good, I think, not only is it important for this time, and there are a whole bunch of other really good books that you can go, but that's a pretty good primer on how to be someone that truly is opening opportunities for everyone that you lead, not just those who are in the majority culture. And anyway, so that's another good one.
Yeah, those are great books. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say the best idea you've ever stolen from another leader? They say great coaches and leaders are also great thieves. So
Yes.
what's a great idea you've stolen?
I probably, the thing that comes to mind is from my husband, which is accept and adjust. So he actually knew Coach McGuire before I did. He's got his degree in PhD or EDD in sports psychology from the University of Virginia, and works with a lot of people on performance psychology stuff. And one of his kind of mantras that he'll use with people is accept and adjust. And so not only has it been useful for me as an individual to be able to be resilient, but it's something that's kind of catchy and people get. It's like, all right, so that didn't work, let's find the next thing. So that's what I would say.
I like that, because there's nothing, particularly from a sports perspective, that there's nothing I can do about anything that's transpired. What can I, adjust is about looking ahead. I like that.
That's right.
Great.
That's
Yeah.
right.
All right, last question. If I wasn't an athletic director, I would blank.
I'd probably be a teacher, which feels like about the same thing. So I don't know if that's cheating. But yeah, I do, going back to that thing that I love about my job is, I do love providing guidance and seeing growth. So that seems, I might try to go back and be a psychologist, but we'll see.
Well, it sounds like you're doing all that now.
Yeah. Surprisingly, yeah, no, it's Joe Johnston at the University of Missouri. Yeah, Joe. So Joe used to do, I don't know if I've ever told him this, but he used to do a whole bunch of, his research was in career counseling, and he was working on an instrument when I was in the doctoral program there. And it was, I wish I could find it. It was this career dreams instrument. And in the first part of it, you were supposed to write down like 8 different things that wishes that you had for your career, that you would do. And they needed, I think they were supposed to be like distinct types of roles or jobs or whatever. And I've always struggled with career ambiguity. And so, I think I wrote down, public speaker, psychologist, teacher, I can't even remember all of the list of things. And I found that, like, this is probably 6 or 7 years ago, I found it in an old document, and it turned out that I was doing all of them, like all of those things that I wrote down, were all, and so, and I share that in part because at that time I wasn't an athletic director. I wasn't even on the path of being, well, I didn't think I was, but I had started to ask to do things that were interesting to me, that I was curious about. And so if when I was working for Joe or when I was working for Bubba, if there was something I wanted to learn about or get better in, I would ask and ask again and ask again. And I was able to do those things. So anyway, I think sometimes we accept limitations maybe too quickly. And that moment of looking at that thing from Joe Johnston was a pretty good, just a cool moment, to realize that I got to do them all.
Yeah, and I'm sure Joe would be thrilled to know how successful his questionnaire was.
I don't know. I'm not sure if what he ever ended up doing with that thing. If we were, I can't remember if we were guinea pigs or if it was fully developed, but it was meaningful to me.
Yeah. Well, I can't thank you enough for your time, and greatly appreciate your thoughtful responses, and hopefully you're able to enjoy the balance of your summer, and I think it's going to be an interesting summer, but
Yeah.
I think your athletic program is very fortunate to have you in charge, and
Oh, thanks.
being able
Thank
to
you.
work with them.
Well, thanks. And thanks for the chance to get to spend a little time with you. It's great to know that you're taking the reins of the program. And I'm not sure if you're aware of it or not, but have started going through the positive coaching program with our coaches just in the last couple of months. And it's been really great. It's generated some wonderful discussions, and so anyway, the University of Missouri continues to influence me and the people I get to lead. So go Tigers.
That's awesome.